everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and I've got one here for you on a hearing that happened on the 9th. And this was the GOP oversight video, and you know, they have like their own YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to that if you want to. And so this hearing, it wasn't really surprising, I guess, but there were some good things that were said, and I wanted to point those out to you. So I'm going to start with the very beginning of it. Well, actually not the very beginning. I'm going to use that for another video, because there was a little bit of hubbub there at the beginning about letters that were exchanged. So we'll look at the letters later and we'll hear what they have to say then, and it'll make a lot more sense. But anyway, on this was Jim Jordan. I'm going to start out with his opening statement, and he used only part of his time, so it's not real long, but I did want to let you know what he had to say here, because I think he makes some very good points. So here we go.
He's not going to do that. In my remaining time, I do want to address the situation of the census. Madam Chairwoman, thank you for convening this hearing. Oversight of the census is one of this committee's core responsibilities. However, I worry that since last January, Democrats have been much more focused on using our committee to attack the Trump administration than on addressing fundamental good government oversight like preparedness for the census. The census determines the apportionment of seats in the House. It dictates how federal funds are distributed to states and localities, and it provides crucial details about the size, vitality, and mobility of our population. This data serves as the gold standard for researchers and statisticians to better understand trends in American life. When we were in the majority, Republicans held several hearings about census preparedness dating back to 2015. Mr. Meadows chaired many of those. In 2018 alone, Republicans convened 5 hearings or briefings about the census. We looked at important topics like information technology preparations, cybersecurity preparedness, and we sought to understand how the Bureau was getting ready for the first census that will allow people to submit responses online. But rather than conducting similar meaningful oversights, the Democrats have spent a year trying to stop one simple question. Are you a citizen? One question. Since obtaining the majority in January 2019, the Democrats have held only one hearing on the 2020 census that did not focus on the census citizenship question, just one. After all these months, I still don't understand why Democrats do not want to know how many U.S. citizens are living in the United States. It's a question that's been on our census before. It's a question asked by numerous nations around the world. And it's a question the United Nations encourages countries to ask. And frankly, if you go talk to any of our constituents and ask them, should we ask on the census if you're a citizen? The person on the street that you would talk to would say, well, of course. Aren't we already doing that? And you would have to say, yes, we are. We've been doing it for 200 years until now. Democrats basically argue that the question is designed to scare immigrant and racial communities in an effort to undercount those populations. That's not correct. The Census Bureau conducted a test last summer to study the operational effects on self-response of including a citizenship question, and found that there was no difference in self-response rates between forms with and forms without a citizenship question. Let me say that again. There was no difference in self-response rates between forms with and forms without a citizenship question. In July of 2019, following a Supreme Court decision, the Trump administration removed the citizenship question from an inclusion in the 2020 census. The Democrats want you to believe this was because the question was fundamentally inappropriate, and the court vindicated their position. But in fact, the Supreme Court held the Trump administration had the authority to ask the question about citizenship on the census, but took issue with the administration's process for doing so under administrative law. The founders included a decennial census in the Constitution to ensure our government is responsive and accountable to the people, not to aid in assisting in political ambitions. I hope that today we can stop playing partisan games, get back to the fundamental oversight that is needed to accomplish the census's stated goal, to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. As we examine hard-to-reach populations today, we should ensure Census does its best to count everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and would yield back.
Now, I thought it was really interesting, the people that they had on the panel. Of course, the Democrats brought in most of them. I think maybe there was one at the very far right end that was actually somebody that the Republicans brought in, but I'm not totally sure on that. He sounded like he was actually working for the census and he was part of the process there. So the others were working for specific groups. And so if you listen to them, I'll just summarize for you folks, because it was the blacks are underrated, that are undercounted, that they're not going to be, some of them are not going to be counted in the census, and they're very concerned about that. The same thing true with American Indians. Now, I'm going to say American Indians because that's what the representative for them used. So, yeah, he said the same thing, we're worried about that. And this time, the census is going to be online primarily. Now, that's not saying that they won't have paper ballots or paper surveys or paper whatever. And it's not saying that they won't send people out to check, but primarily they're expecting to be having it all done online. And so there was big concern among several of the people that represent rural communities that maybe there wouldn't be enough access to being online. So, and that's a real possibility because some of the areas don't have internet like other areas. And some of them, they were saying that they still had dial-up, which would be incredibly slow and would take forever for a lot of these sites, especially like YouTube. I remember doing dial-up on YouTube. It was not fun. You would wait forever and ever and ever for the video to load, and then you could watch it. It was miserable. Then Jim Jordan, they go back and forth with the questioning, and then Jim Jordan had an opportunity to question, do his questioning thing. And I'm going to play that for you because they've been talking back and forth. And, like I said, most of the people that were on the panel were representing some group that they were afraid wasn't going to get counted. And like the Hispanics, I had to laugh at the Hispanic guy because he was talking about, or Latino, whichever, he wants to call it. But he was worried, they had plenty of information in Spanish for the Latinos, but they didn't have enough in English for them. And I'm like, why can't they just read the regular English? Why do they have to have special English materials for the Latinos? It was almost like he was calling them stupid or something. If they know English and they feel more comfortable with that, why would they need special materials to tell them how to fill out the census? I didn't get that. And I also didn't get that with like the blacks and everything. They're almost trying to make these groups out to be so clueless. I mean, really, that's what it came down to. Like, they were too out of things to realize how important the census data is to, all the different programs that we have, the government programs and things. I don't know. Anyway, so that's how they came across to me. Well, Jim Jordan kind of put a couple of them in their place. Oh yeah, and the one guy was representing the Asian community, and he said that there's not enough materials in enough languages out there, the Asian languages. I was like, okay, so you have to have all of this in all these different languages. I don't even know how many languages they're going to have this census in. So I want to play this part for you. Here we go. Jim Jordan's questioning time.
Questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So now we can't even debate it. Think of what we just heard, what we've heard from testimony from Mr. Yang and Mr. Vargas. For a year, the Democrats told us, the citizenship question on the census is bad. It's a bad idea, even though we've been doing it since 1820. They told us it's a bad idea. Now today, even though it's not, even though when the Census Bureau did a study last summer, they saw no difference in self-response rates between forms with the citizenship question and those without the citizenship question. But now today it's even worse. They said, just the fact we had a debate is harmful. Now think how scary that is. Mr. Yang and Mr. Vargas both said that, and the gentlelady from the District of Columbia just said the same thing. We're not even allowed to talk about it now. Now that is really scary. The debate itself about a question that's been asked since 1820. Let's just get the facts straight. Between 1820 and 1950, it was asked on the decennial census. Between 1970 and 2000, it was asked on the long-form census. Between 2000 and today, the Census Bureau has placed it on the American Community Survey. So it's been asked every single time. But now, today, we're not even supposed to debate it. This is where the left wants to take us. This is, think of what Judge Alito, previous member, talked about the Supreme Court decision. Here's what Judge Alito said in his decision. Concurring in part, dissenting in part. No one disputes that it's important to know how many inhabitants of this country are citizens. He's actually wrong. I think making a good point, but I think he's wrong. Every Democrat on this committee disputes that. The witnesses here in front of us, they dispute that, even though all our constituents say, yeah, we should know how many. Mr. Yang, do you think it's important to know how many citizens are in this country?
It is important under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, to ensure that all residents are counted under every decennial census.
That's not the question I asked you.
And if there's anything that detracts from that decennial census in terms of offering a fair and accurate count, that is a concern.
So you disagree with Judge Alito? No one disputes that it's important to know how many inhabitants of this country are citizens. You think he's wrong? You think
that's not the objective of the decennial census?
Again, that's not what I'm asking. You think it's appropriate to know how many people in this country are citizens?
Well, I would offer no further response because we are here to talk.
Let the record show the gentleman won't even answer the question. So between 1820 and 1950, when our country asked inhabitants of this nation, "Are you a citizen?" was that wrong?
I dispute what your understanding of the history of the question is with respect to the decennial census. But we can offer further testimony.
The Census Bureau today on the American Community Survey, should they be asking people the citizenship question? Do you disagree with what the Census Bureau is doing today as we speak?
May I answer that question, Congressman?
I addressed Mr. Yang.
Sure.
I'm trying to get him to answer a question that he refuses to answer.
I believe I did offer an answer.
I ask you a simple question. Is it appropriate to ask a citizenship? Is it appropriate to ask to find out how many people in this country are citizens?
It is appropriate to ask under the census that we are talking about. We are trying to determine the population of the United States. And anything that detracts from the fairness and accuracy of that count would not be part of the mission.
And then I followed up and said, so do you think it's wrong that the Census Bureau on the American Community Survey is asking a citizenship question? Do you think that's wrong then?
That is a survey instrument that has been tested in the context of the American Community Survey, which previously was the long form. And that is different than the decennial 2020 census.
Okay, if you're not going to answer my question, let me ask this. Is it okay to debate this issue, or do you stick with what you said in your opening testimony, what the gentlelady from the District of Columbia said, and what Mr. Vargas said, that we shouldn't even have a discussion about it because somehow that may impact what happens on the census?
What I said was that the fact that this question was introduced has caused damage to the community. And that damage continues to this day, as demonstrated by the studies from Mr. Vargas, as demonstrated by the Census Bureau itself. And so that is what we need to address to ensure a fair and accurate count
and so,
of the census.
Because of that concern, you think it's appropriate to limit the First Amendment, limit speech, limit debate in the United States Congress? We shouldn't even have had this debate? Is that what you're saying?
That is not what I said. I said that what we need to do is to ensure that everybody is counted, and anything that has done damage to the fact that everybody would be encouraged to participate in this.
You said the debate in your opening statement, you said the debate that took place over the last year on whether to include a citizenship question was harmful to what's going to happen on the census and the census count and being able to count the people across this country. That's what you said. And so what I'm asking you is, you don't think that debate should have taken place at all then? You don't think it's appropriate to have that debate in the United States Congress about something that, again, has been done in this country since 1820?
I believe that you are mischaracterizing what I said.
I believe you won't answer the question. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Yeah, he didn't pull any punches, did he? I like the way he nailed a guy. Because that is the real truth. They don't think it matters if people are legal citizens or they're non-citizens. I think it makes a huge difference, and especially in the counting, because frankly, in my opinion, when they're doing a census to try to, establish how many representatives each state gets, I think they should only count citizens in that, because the representatives are representing citizens. So why should they count non-citizens? Now, in some ways, I have no problems with people who have green cards or have been naturalized. I think that's really spectacular that they go through all the things they have to become citizens. And I am all for that. I've got a couple people I know who went through all that. I have a friend who's got a green card. He's been working here for several years. I have no problems with those people. If that's the way you want to do things and you're here legally, that's okay with me. But what bothers me is when they come in illegally and they don't want to follow our laws, because when they come here illegally, they've broken a law. They're not following our laws. So that's really what they're kind of saying. And I wanted to, point out this next one, which was Representative Heiss. And he really was not very happy with some of the comments that they were making, too, about the president. So here we go.
It is interesting to me that we're coming to some, all of us, I think on both sides of the aisle, agree that what's most important is to get an accurate count. And yet what seems to hijack every one of these census hearings is a citizenship question. And I again would assume that everyone in this room would agree it's important for us as a country to know how many people here who are citizens. That's about as basic as you can get. It's important for us to have that information. How we go about getting it I suppose there's multiple ways for that to be done. But what I get annoyed at is how that issue is used really to attack the president. And I don't think that's fair. I think that's unnecessary, and there's no reason for us to create an atmosphere of attacking the president on something constitutionally based as the census is. So I would just urge my colleagues on the other side to just take the politics out of this and let's try to get to the issue of an accurate count. And Mr. Moore
Now, the next one that I wanted to share with you is Representative Comer, and he was talking about a correction that needed to be done, because I have to tell you, Carolyn Maloney is now the chairman of that committee, and she made a lot of false statements, some blatant lies when she made her opening statement. And, there were things she said that were just not true. But, that's what they think they can do, evidently. I don't understand it. And one of them happened to have been that she was talking about the Supreme Court decision on this census question. And like I said, that was definitely not it. That's not what happened there. So here's Representative Comer.
Questioning.
Thank you. And before I begin my questioning about my concern for an undercount in rural America, especially rural Kentucky, Madam Chairman, with all due respect, I wanted to correct an inaccurate statement that you made with regards to the president wanting an inaccurate count. He didn't want an accurate count. That's not true. The president represents the majority of working, tax-paying Americans who simply want to know how many citizens reside in the United States who are not legal American citizens. That has absolutely nothing to do with the final count. Every person residing in the United States will be counted in the census, and that will apply to the Electoral College. So I wanted to correct that inaccurate statement.
The next one I want to point out is Representative Groffman. And he took offense at the whole idea that they were trying, the Democrats were trying to promote that Trump is anti-immigrant. And check out the statistics he gives, because it's a really significant thing. And so here we go.
Thank you. The first point I'd like to make, and I'm a little bit offended here. I think one of our witnesses today said President Trump is anti-immigrant. In the most recent year available, we had 756,000 people sworn in this country legally, which is the highest it's been in several years. And to call a president anti-immigrant when that happens is just a ridiculous partisan slap and not true. I believe it was Mr. Vargas who said, I'm not sure. But at least in my district, people whose ancestors are south of the border. I can think a lot of them who are very pro-immigrant, but do not want people breaking the law. And insofar as you feel that because you represent something called the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, I just want to make it clear to anybody else listening out there today that at least in my district, people of descent south of the border do believe in obeying the laws, and they would object to the idea that you would imply that President Trump is anti-immigrant because he is for enforcing the laws. Now, my next comment is, seeing the groups we have before us today, I think there's an effort in this country to permanently divide America by having people obsess over their ancestry. There are conflicts here in this building. There are conflicts by occupation, as people want to, have more or less credentialism. Gun owners are always under attack. Think about a year ago, the Knights of Columbus were under attack. We always have the ongoing conflict between taxpayers and taxpayers and tax takers. But I think when we set up so many groups like this, it creates a false narrative that we have going on in America is disagreement by racial background. I disagree with that. But thinking about that over time, I think due to intermarriage, it's going to become more apparent that there's less and less of that sort of conflict here. And I'm going to ask you folks when I fill out the census form, or when somebody else fills out the census form, how exactly they should fill it out when you have a mixed background. I can think of several people here who, that I know, are say one half Latin and one half direct European in ancestry. How should you fill out the form if that's your background? We'll ask Ms. Gupta. We'll ask her. Half. How do you fill out the form?
The census allows you to self-identify as to your question around racial background and ethnic background.
So in other words, there's no rule. I'll give you an extreme example. Okay, we have a woman running for president right now, Elizabeth Warren. She was very proud. She held a press conference that she was 164th Native American. Apparently she used that when she applied for a job a while back. Do you think it's appropriate that she would fill out the form that she's Native American?
I mean, the census permits self-identification.
Do you think it's okay, though?
I think it should be accurate information.
Do you think that's accurate?
Self-identification is accurate information.
Okay. Well, we'll ask Mr. Alice. To be a member of a tribe, I don't know about your tribe, but a lot of tribes, you have to be at least 1/4 the background of that tribe. But it means you're 3/4 something else. If somebody who's 1/4 Native American ancestry and 3/4 European ancestry, would it be appropriate for them to fill it out European, and would it be appropriate to fill them out Native American, or how should they fill that out?
So my tribe's located just north of your district.
Yes, I know.
And if you're a member of a federally recognized tribe, you have the absolute right to represent yourself as a Native American. As my colleagues on the panel have accurately stated, and which the number of consultations that NCAI has conducted or has hosted with Census Bureau, when that question has come up within Indian country audiences, the answer has been you self-identify in a manner that you think is appropriate, which has caused some level of confusion. Okay, but it's the standard statement that is made by folks at the U.S. Census Bureau when addressing that particular question. Okay. And I will make a little adjustment to a comment. I'm trying to understand there is no difference in a particular tribe. If you're a tribal member and you're enrolled and you're a 1/4 member or a 3/4 member, you're a tribal member.
Right, I understand. I'm just saying the average American. I don't think the average American race obsesses like some people here, but the average American, I think, if you had a friend who was 3/4 European ancestry and 1/4 Native American, I don't know, okay, thank you.
So did you catch that? yeah, more people have been sworn in to be citizens since Trump has been in office. And so, you can't say that he doesn't love immigrants. It's not a matter of whether a person is an immigrant or not. It's a matter of whether they're legal here. If you follow our laws, you come into our country legally, that's not a problem. It's a problem when you come into our country illegally. That's the issue. And that's what Trump has been trying to address. So I really appreciate what he had to say. Now, when Jordan was talking, he talked about this opinion of Justice Alito. And so I wanted to point that out to you. This is actually the entire opinion, the whole thing written out if you want to read the entire thing for the Department of Commerce v. New York, which is the whole census question, the citizenship question on the census issue. And so this was his opinion. This is page 73 is where it starts. And it goes through. And what Jim Jordan was talking about is at the very beginning here. And Justice Alito, concurring in part and dissenting in part, it is a sign of our time that the inclusion of a question about citizenship on the census has become a subject of bitter public controversy and has led to today's regrettable decision. While the decision to place such a question on the 2020 census questionnaire is attacked as racist, there is a broad international consensus that inquiring about citizenship on a census is not just appropriate, but advisable. No one disputes that it is important to know how many inhabitants of this country are citizens. But what Jordan was saying, I think, is a very good point, because obviously, if you watched the whole thing, which I don't really recommend, it was not that interesting of a hearing. So unless you're really wanting to know what's going on with the census, sure, go ahead if you want, but it's like 4 hours long. I don't recommend this particular one. It wasn't that intriguing. Had a lot of dead time and kind of blah answers. But anyway, I think Jim Jordan was right because he was saying that, yeah, they do dispute it. It's such a logical question. And if you'd go out on the street and you poll people, they probably all would be saying, sure, yeah, why don't you ask if people are citizens? Don't we need to know how many are citizens? But the Democrats in Congress evidently don't see it that way. And that's why he was pointing this out. But yeah, you can go ahead and read this whole opinion if you want to. But like I said, this is page 73 of the document if you want to go and see that and read just his opinion. I mean, it was kind of a split court, really, on this whole thing. Let me go back to the beginning. Okay. It was not a decision that came through very easily. A lot of times, it'll be 9-0 or it'll be 5-4 or whatever. And so they're all together on it. I'm looking for the where it says there were different parts of it that they were very, divided on. And so they have to put all this information down there. I don't know. I was looking through it before and now I don't know where I found it. But when it tells how many they went each direction, let me do this. Oops, I can't spell Alito with one hand. Okay, yeah, here's where the opinion is. You can see that they had parts 1 and 2, and the opinion of the court with respect to parts 3, 4B, and 4C, in which Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh joined, with respect to part 4A, in which Thomas, Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Kavanaugh joined. And so, see, it's like it was different people all the time. So they were really divided over this whole thing. And so Thomas filed an opinion concurring in part and dissenting in part. And Gorsuch and Kavanaugh joined with them. Breyer filed an opinion concurring in part and dissenting in part. And Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and Kagan joined. And then Alito filed an opinion, a concurring in part and dissenting in part. So they all had various opinions on this particular question. But the basic outcome of it was that although it was constitutional for them to ask the question if people are citizens on a census, they just went about it improperly, or there was some debate as to whether it was done properly. That was the huge question. They were trying to, the Democrats were trying to say that it was done because of political reasons. But, it's a citizenship question. This should be a no-brainer. But obviously it's not. And like, Alito said, he assumed everybody, there should not be any debate on this. This should be, it's not. That's the problem. There is debate about whether it is a legitimate thing legally able to put on the census. And there was one guy at one point who said that one of the people on the panel who was saying, well, if it's not in the Constitution, then we should not apply it. And somebody asked him, well, then, does it state, what does it state in the Constitution? Well, it's just a count. That's all the Constitution says, is that it's supposed to be a count. And so asking any questions about whether you're male or female, or if you're black, or if you're Asian, or if you're Hispanic, or whatever, those really are not constitutional if you want to go that route. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There is something that I think we're going to see in this, which could be very strange. The data that's going to come from this is something that, people can self-identify what they are, like what ethnicity they are, or what color their skin is, what race they belong to. They can self-identify, and I assume they're going to be self-identifying on gender. So what's going to happen, folks? How is this data going to skew what's to come and how public programs are put together by the government? Because the government does things according to the data in the census. Well, if the census is skewed because people are self-identifying as all kinds of things like Pocahontas, how are we supposed to know for sure what really is the makeup of our country? How are we supposed to know if people are reporting accurately on this data? How are we supposed to know if people are not adding more population than really exists? You know what I'm saying? So that's a possible way that this system could be gamed. I don't know how it's going to work. It's always been people filling out those little forms on your own. But what happens when people are not as truthful as they used to be, and they identify as different than what they really are? So I just think that's something to keep in mind, how this census is going to come out. It could be quite different than what people anticipate. So I don't know, but I wanted to point all this out to you. I'll leave all the links down below. Well, all the links. The link to the full video here, and then I'll leave the link to this Supreme Court decision, the opinion. You can go through and read it. Again, it doesn't take very long because they have wide margins on both sides, and it's fairly big print when you're reading. So it does read pretty fast, but it's a lot of legal talk. So if that's not something you enjoy, then you may not care about it. But this is pretty much, they lay out what the Constitution says, and then who's supposed to do it according to the law. And the Secretary of Commerce is the person who is in charge of that. So yeah, that's what's been going on. And I wanted to let you know about that. As for personal stuff, yeah, the tooth is still not happy here, folks. And I'm kind of a little scared about the weekend because my dentist, I don't want to have to need the dentist over the weekend. So far so good, but it's only Friday night, and so I don't know what Saturday and Sunday are going to hold. I just hope that, I hang in there and still keep progressing going forward. It's getting better, but yeah, it still is. I don't really want to talk very much, and it's just very draining on my energy levels. So I'm working on it, guys. I want to get back to doing a video every day because, boy, you get out of that habit and it's hard to get back in because there's so many things that I could be doing and you get distracted easy. It's kind of like writing a book. You get a lot of distractions and you really have to kind of focus in and get doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I hope I can get back to that really soon and, get back into the routine of things because I miss it, but it's been kind of a nice vacation away from some of the insanity. But yeah, Congress is back in session and there are letters that I've got to go through and oh yeah, so much going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to see what I can dig up. I've got one set of letters that I want to deal with and there's another bunch that I need to look at first and then we'll see what happens. So that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by and I'll see y'all later.